In the real world, X and Y are these coordinates while Z is the height. In Minecraft, X and Z are the same while Y is the height for some reason. Also, these old Minecraft games are selling for almost $100 each against Mojang's wishes, something they wish they could prevent, something they're actively trying to do, especially when it comes to capes for payment, because Mojang is one of the newest games companies that came from being a single person into the biggest game of all time, and this means lots of things that were tailored for the old days of Minecraft don't necessarily work in the modern era, which is why you have huge contrasts like how the first Minecon started in 2010 was just a meetup in the park, and then just 6 years later it is a gathering that fills an entire huge convention center where the latest Minecraft news is announced, and you have crowds that look like this. This is something which is crazy, and today we're going to be taking a look at some of the biggest examples of Minecraft regretting something that they did in their smaller days, just like how you might regret not subscribing to the IBX Toycat YouTube channel if you want to stay up to date with the latest in news regarding things like capes, for example. If you weren't following this channel, you might have missed out on the Pan Cape, for example, one of my favorites, as well as the Legacy Skin Pack, which recently stopped existing for some reason. Anyway, you can stay up to date with the latest versions of those, as well as all sorts of other Minecraft news, but let's talk about the capes, because these are a big source of division within Mojang, and always kind of have been. On the one hand, capes are meant to reward players who have done something useful for Mojang. For example, this cape was given to the person who bought the millionth copy of Minecraft, this cape was given to the person who had the idea of the Pigman, and this cape was just given to a musician that Notch liked called Danny B. Styles. Do you see how it says DB on there for them? I mean, I guess it could be standing for decibels because music, but anyway, these one-of-a-kind capes were a fun little idea that would make you more visible in multiplayer, except actually, being visible isn't always a good thing. In the same way that maybe you don't want to have a flashy car, these people with these capes are always going to stand out, not only when they're playing multiplayer, but also in the sense that everyone knows exactly where you can get these one-of-a-kind capes. If you have the account AcronMan1, that is the only way to have this cape, and the fact that over 2,900 people look at his account every month is proof that lots of people envy this thing. If you're him, you have to put so many extra layers of security into your account and your personal identity to make sure people don't try and track you down, because there are all sorts of people that would love to have your cape and are willing to do some nefarious things to get it. It is this in the same way that when you see a Ferrari, you know that person probably has money, you might go after someone with a rare Minecraft cape. As ridiculous as that sounds, I think the proof of this comes from the fact that the Minecon capes can add hundreds of dollars of value to your account. Here is a Minecon cape from 2011 that sold for £400, although since you can't sell the cape, it's the account with the cape, and the account does have a value of about £25, so if we take that away and then convert it, it's still over $500 of value that people attach to this simple red creeper face, because someone would like to have a cape that shows they are a Minecraft OG that darn bad. And consider that there are hundreds of these that exist. There are thousands of capes like this 2012 cape and this 2013 cape. I like this one. It makes you look like you're some master redstone player, even though you actually just went to a Minecon. And then the 2015 cape is always going to be in my heart because it's the first Minecon I went to, and so I have the cape myself. I don't have the 2016 cape though, because even though I went to that Minecon and I picked up 3 of the codes, none of them worked for me, which you can find out, by the way, by going to my name MC and checking my cape selection. It seems like it's missing something, even though I'm pretty sure I went to Minecon 2016, mostly because I can check the videos on this channel of me being there. That's right, I was covering news from 2016 Minecon, and that was years into my channel. I'm an old man when it comes to Minecraft. But yeah, also, here's me playing mini games there. The point being is if these capes add hundreds of dollars in value, Acronman's one cape must have such a high value attached to it, and that is something that is a big problem, you know, as well as being a fun flash, it's also something that Mojang have created, an account and security concern. Every single person like him, not just people with their capes, have this huge issue with security on their account. There are always going to be people coming after them, and this is a big problem. Just like how it's a big problem that Minecraft messed up the coordinates really early on, and now it's too late to change them. If you think about it, coordinates are all arbitrary. Using the letters X, Y, and Z is just convention, but if we really wanted to, we could even call them the letters I, B, and X, as long as you understood that I stood for incline, and B stood for breadth, while X was xylophones, which obviously go on this dimension, then all of a sudden, this coordinate system would make sense. I need to say that right now, because technically speaking, you could argue Minecraft coordinates are correct, because if you have a two-dimensional graph, there is X and there is Y, although both those things can go up and down. In general, there is X for left to right, and Y is up and down. So logically speaking, it would make sense if Z was that third coordinate, the depth going forwards when you go to 3D, 3D, and so when you jump from 2D to 3D, it might make sense that Z would be this depth dimension. And honestly, a few systems do actually do this, but if you are to look at the vast majority, and indeed, if we go to the Cartesian coordinate system, we go to the Wikipedia page, this is what a three-dimensional object would look like. It would be X and Y to represent the dimensions it is on the ground, with Z representing the height. In other words, think of the ground as being a 2D map, which is easy because of the squares. Any one of those tiles that you're on could be represented by X and Y, while your height could be Z. Minecraft went an entirely different direction, which honestly they decided not to fix just because, well, it would take a lot of work and people don't look at coordinates anyway. They're an internal thing until the console edition came around, when they started being displayed on maps, and that was fine because most players aren't holding their maps at all times, so coordinates aren't really used by most players, except when the Bedrock edition came around, and then you better believe that they're available on screen at all times. This is actually a separate regret. Many in the studio regret making this an option. Coordinates being cheats or not was a big debate, and so many in the studio believe that you shouldn't even have coordinates on your screen, let alone them be this weird jumbled way around, but such is just the Minecraft we have. Such is also true for quasi-connectivity. This is an absolutely quasi feature that allows redstone to go diagonally in weird circumstances, something that was never originally intended, but something they decided to stick with for a little bit, even though it is a bug because so many people were using it to make fun things. This means that they can't ever fix the bug without breaking people's old redstone contraptions, which means there's a permanent bug in Java's redstone, or a feature if you're a big redstone aficionado, but this is something they did fix when it came to Bedrock. When Bedrock redstone came around, they were starting from scratch, and so they could design the redstone as it was originally intended to work. This is something that you'd figure would be amazing, bug-free redstone, but almost everyone agrees, Bedrock redstone and Java people combined, that Java players prefer their redstone, and Bedrock players are envious of all the things you can do with those bugs, and so a bug-free Minecraft was actually what everyone at Mojang wanted, but then they made it and people said, nah, I prefer the bugs, and that is absolutely hilarious, but it's something that's true for any long-standing bug. Technically, horses fitting in boats was just a bug, but it's obviously one that made the game much more rich. Obviously, the rooftop of the Nether only being accessible on Java is a bug, but it's something that people love, and so saying that it's a, it's just a bug on Java so it won't come to Bedrock makes people actively have a worse time than if they just implemented the same bug on Bedrock. In fact, this is something that's really tricky when you're remastering something. The same thing happened with Super Mario 64. When they remastered that game, they removed the backwards long jump, which was a really cool thing that would allow you to fly backwards, but at the same time, this was something the community loved. Once a bug is well known enough, it becomes a feature, something that is true for everything from the combat to the creeper. Anyway, speaking of the combat, we have to mention right now, the combat that is in 1.9 was highly regretted by no one. Actually, the community loved the 1.9 update. They loved the delays in combat. They felt it was really good for PvP. They thought it was a wonderful addition to the game, and there were no complaints about it, which is really surprising, which is why they added it to the Bedrock edition just a few months later, and why we have a unified combat system across Bedrock and Java. No complaints from anyone. What a good time. And in fact, what is this doing in this video? No one ever complains about this combat, but people have had complaints about story mode. This is probably one of Minecraft's biggest regrets, because one of their first spin-offs was with Telltale Studios, a studio that was really beloved for their, at the time, their Walking Dead game and their Game of Thrones games, where you could basically have a mixture between a story being told via video, but also have the interactivity of a video game. Honestly, to me, they're basically movies, which is why when Minecraft teamed up with them, they actually made story mode available for Netflix, because you can play it like it's a movie anyway. So Minecraft story mode was a really well-intentioned venture to spin off from Minecraft and have people learn more about the world. They had entirely new characters, an entirely different world, and a story that genuinely captivated quite a few people, and then they decided to add YouTubers to it, which was really fun too. I'm mostly just sad I didn't get the invite, but anyway, the point here is that Minecraft Story Mode was a beloved game by a section of the community, and honestly, Minecraft thought they'd done a really good job. Their first spin-off to Minecraft is going so well, a sign of great things to come, surely, right? Yeah, definitely, all the other games after this were wonderful. Anyway, let's just skip the entire middle part of this where we talk talk about how Telltale had some issues and blah 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 blah, because then they eventually collapsed. What happens when a video game company goes under? Well, when most companies go under, their assets can be bought by other studios, which is why, for example, Fallout 1 and 2 were developed by a different studio to Fallout 3, which is now a Bethesda title. And this happens all the time with major IPs, but it couldn't happen with all of the ones owned by Telltale because they never owned The Walking Dead or Game of Thrones or Minecraft. These were instead held by HBO or AMC or Mojang, and then the studio was just licensed to make these games. This means these games weren't property of those studios necessarily, but they also weren't property of Telltale. In other words, when Telltale went under, the entire studio and all of their projects went straight into limbo. Not only could they not be created anymore, but also selling them would be tricky because who would get the revenue? Again, it can't be Mojang, it can't be Telltale because they don't exist, and so as a result, trying to get these games is very, very tricky today. And if you search on the Xbox 360 for Minecraft Story Mode, they set the prices to $99.99, not because they are trying to price gouge people on the loss of this. It's just because they legally cannot create new copies of the game, which is what they'd be doing when they sell it to you, which is absolutely wild. And it means that buying a disc copy of the game is legal because that was already created, the software was minted to the disc, but buying a new digital copy would not be possible. This is an important part of game preservation. All of the Minecraft Story Mode games are only possible to play via pirated means or via discs that already exist, and this is something that is a big problem that will happen as games get older and older. What about entirely online games that have the server shut down? What about games where the studio goes under and no one owns the rights? This is going to happen more and more, perhaps with some of your favorite games, and it's an absolute shame in my opinion. But when it comes to Mojang, I'm sure they regret partnering with Telltale Studios. They probably had a really enticing offer and they figured, what could go wrong with this? It's a beloved studio, but ultimately, when any game studio is just a few months of bad decisions away from collapse, something which we really have to really compliment any studio that doesn't go through that on. Not Mojang, because they have the biggest selling game of all time, but any other studio that's lasted for 10 or 20 years, you really know that they have managed to do something to make themselves financially resilient, and so you can give them a big thumbs up and probably trust them with your money because they might not go under for another 5 or 10 years yet. And so the last big regret has to definitely be the regret of building Minecraft as a game rather than an engine. Something that was definitely possible in the early days of Minecraft when it was just Notch building it was to build the game and then slowly make some alterations and bring in a new feature in just a day. And then you make some new alterations to the code and now you've got a whole update that comes out in just a week. In fact, in the early days of Minecraft, there were updates every few days. There were dozens of updates every single month, as opposed to right now where we're lucky if we get a major one every year and maybe a minor one every month or two. This is because of the challenges of growing a team. Counterintuitively enough, having 50 people or 500 people work on a game does not mean that development goes 500 times faster because they all have to work on the same code base. When Minecraft was just Notch and Jeb, they actually put out a visualization of them both working on the game. It looked like this. It's fascinating to see how all the code files appear and how they have dependencies from other code files. Now, how it all comes into this big web of messy files, and that is still the Minecraft Java that we know today. Minecraft Bedrock, on the other hand, was partially built with the future in mind. Post the Microsoft acquisition, they were always building the game towards being this multi-platform monster, which is why it's a UWP, Universal Windows Program, which is why it can run on every device under the sun, clearly. There's a version for the Samsung Smart Fridge and the Apple TV, and it's crazy just how many versions of Minecraft there are, and this is all possible because they built it with this functionality in mind. It takes a lot longer to build the foundations for something like this, but then different developers can work on different parts of the game. If there's just one giant spaghetti mess of code, then working on the mobs might affect the way that structures generate, whereas if everything is neatly divided off, you can work on mobs without creating bugs in the blocks, and you can work on the desert biome without messing up the swamp biome even, and this is an important part of how Minecraft is developed today. They're trying to make the game as independent in terms of files as it can be, so that different developers can work on different parts without potentially ruining the entire thing, which is a real struggle as much as it might sound, like it is one. It's an even bigger one than you might assume. So this is why Bedrock is kind of retroactively at the same time as building forwards, building backwards as well. They're trying to build Bedrock into a game engine. They built an entirely new rendering engine called the Render Dragon, which is what Minecraft Legends runs on, crazily enough. But the interesting thing about this is by building the game out like this, they'll be able to allow modding to be done easier. They'll allow all sorts of changes to be done by a huge team, and they'll be able to develop the game in a much faster faster and more effective way. In the same way that, Fortnite can have entirely custom created maps that anyone can share, or customize the entire game engine because it's made by Epic Games, the people who make Unreal Engine, that is something that could be possible in Minecraft. And ultimately, the only thing standing between them and getting it done is the fact that the users will not be happy if they suspend updates for 3 years just to work on the fundamental parts of the game. Something that you have to balance as a game studio, but especially if you're Minecraft, is what people want in the right here, right now, and how people would prefer the game to be better in the long run. If they could get down to making an update every 6 months, but they have to go 3 years without one, would people prefer that, or they just prefer the one update a year forever onwards? And this is something I'm always personally running into. All sorts of things could make future me's life easier, but I'm just not doing them. I think being an effective person is doing that for yourself, but instead I'll have like, I'm at 90% drain on my storage. Rather than deleting stuff now, I wait until I get to 100 and something breaks. Rather than just cleaning my room, that's the simplest thing to do, I wait until it gets like a little bit too gross and I'm like, I'll fix this now. There are all sorts of ways you could make future you's life better, and I think that you should embark on one of them. Rather than doing a subscribe pitch at the end of this video, how about instead I kind of reverse route this on you and I say, wow, Minecraft could have done so much better by building an engine from scratch at the start to make the game we love now so much more, easily moddable and changeable and updatable, and so you should do something like that in your regular life. You don't want to regret something huge that you're doing today, and so live a life that is just slightly better. Everything you do today, do it with deliberate intention and see how well that works for you. I bet it will improve your day, unless it's already 11 PM, in which case, well, you've got an hour to do something good for yourself. Do your best. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.